Good morning. So I just wanted to put in an additional plug for another free Axios newsletter that I edit. It's called Generate, and it's a nice daily summary of energy business news, policy news, and anything else that we find really interesting. And you can sign up for that on Axios.com. I'm very excited to be here in Baton Rouge discussing how Louisiana is powering up across industries. And so for our first interview, we're going to zoom in on the state's energy economy and take a look at everything that's happening from the potential impact of President Trump's tariffs, what's happening in the legislature, and more. So please join me in welcoming to the stage the Associate Director of the Tulane Energy Institute, Professor Eric Smith. Good to see you. So let's just talk very briefly about Louisiana's overall energy situation. Obviously, you've said it has numerous advantages. It's business friendly, it has strong community support, strong political support, obviously, and a whole host of other advantages. I mean, what's your sort of assessment for the outlook on energy in the state in 2025?
I think the state's doing just fine. I wonder a little bit about some of our neighboring friends in other states who I think are probably not doing quite as well in terms of power generation, for example.
Right.
And I know that our friends in Texas don't deal with the rest of the country really very much when it comes to power trading. So some things seem to be doing better than others. We're major exporters of LNG, as you all know. The issue with LNG is we sell a lot of it to China, or at least to Asia in general. So things that happen out in Australia, for example, will impact how much we ship to China. What we do in Washington can affect what happens to shipments. One of the goals of the shale play, which people tend to forget, but it's only been since 2010 that we have had shale available to us. And it's roughly triple the amount of hydrocarbons that we can produce. So we're doing pretty well there, but people hate uncertainty, at least investors hate uncertainty, and they're getting more than their fair share these days with these debates about tariffs.
Right.
So that's
I wanted to ask you about tariffs. I mean, you've said there could be repercussions with the state's trading partners, and then you and I were also just talking about yesterday's news with the steel tariffs.
Right. Well, I mean, the steel tariffs are a good example. We have these huge spending plans in Louisiana, $60 billion or so in capital projects that kind of span everywhere from additional LNG export capabilities to producing low-carbon steel, all sorts of projects. They all depend on somebody investing money, and some of those investors tend to be foreigners, some of them are U.S. People don't invest if they don't think they're going to get paid back. You don't do that, I don't do that. It's just not human nature. And the problem with tariffs, regardless of your views on it as an economic ploy, the problem with tariffs is that most of the world's economists, after 1,000 years of trying, have decided that it's probably not a good idea long term.
Right.
So everything in that $60 billion bucket just went up by whatever the percentages are. I think the tariff itself on steel is going up from 25 to 50%. And it covers aluminum too. Our biggest suppliers of things like steel and aluminum are countries like Canada and Mexico, Brazil, Korea, who's a big customer of ours. All of those products have just become less competitive on the world market. So that's a threat. Louisiana doesn't control the tariff decisions. That's something that comes out of Washington, but the effects can be immediate, and we need to worry about that. That's on the supply side. On the demand side, guess who our biggest customer for all the natural gas liquids are? And we produce a lot of it. Don't forget, we had, in effect, natural gas liquids before the shale play. it came out of the refineries. It still comes out of the refineries. That's still our major source of petrochemical supply. So all of these natural gas liquids that came with the shale plays have been negatively impacted, if you will, if you have tariffs, across-the-board tariffs on natural gas liquids. Interestingly, China is the biggest single customer for those materials. So again, we like to be able to ship these things to the tune of a couple of million barrels a day.
Right.
Around the world, and they're very much in demand for making cost-effective plastics primarily.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to do that if we have licensing requirements that have never existed before, and if we have prohibitions on shipping them to China.
Yeah, yeah. You were saying that the NGLs are one of the few things that China hasn't put a countervailing duty on.
That's right. With all of these, I'll raise you 20% and see your 20% and raise it 50%. China has not done that because they simply have no other source of supply.
Right, right. Getting back to the Trump administration and Louisiana, can you sort of talk very generally about some of their budget moves and other things? I mean, Louisiana is and was positioned very well on offshore wind. There was also the recent Energy Department cancellation of about $3 billion in carbon capture and decarbonization grants, and one of those was $500 million for Heidelberg Materials in the state. Can you just sort of briefly discuss some of the
again, it gets back to this uncertainty argument I mentioned earlier. If you are going to invest in Louisiana or really anywhere in the U.S., you want to have some at least rationale that you'll get paid back over the next 10 or 20 years. We can't tell you what the economics are 24 hours in advance at this point. So that will have a detrimental effect on our ability to continue to grow the Louisiana economy. Don't forget, Louisiana's been in the extraction business for about 300 years. We know how to do that.
Right.
And it's not a big oil-producing state. It's still a big natural gas-producing state. And the Gulf, fortunately, is still producing a couple of million barrels a day. But all of those businesses are very capital-intensive. And again, people don't like uncertainty.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about EVs. You referred to the whole situation with EVs and the supply chain as a two-edged sword. Can you sort of talk about that?
Yeah, we think it's interesting. The guy I work with, Pierre Connor, has a beautiful Rivian EV. I'm always happy to take rides in it. The problem is that most of the guts of that car are based on products we don't produce domestically, including things like carbon fiber for the strength members and graphite, which is used to build the batteries. Not just little bits of trace amounts. The battery, the big block, is made out of graphite. We have allowed our petrochemical infrastructure to atrophy to the point that we don't really produce those materials. So if you start impacting trade, you get these secondary effects, and one of those would be, great, we'd love to build more EVs, but we can't get the batteries, so we're not going to build the cars.
Right.
Or we can't get the carbon fiber, so we can't build the motors. Those are the kinds of knock-on effects, if you will, that occur. So yes, I think anybody who wants to drive an EV should be able to do that, and they should be able to get it at the best price they can. But you're not going to have a U.S. construction base unless you do something to accelerate the ability to produce these. We are trying to mine more natural graphite in Alabama. There are ways to take the petroleum coke that comes out of our refineries and convert that into synthetic graphite. We've known how to do carbon fiber. Tulane, in its research years ago, was one of the pioneers in graphene, for example, which is a high-performance graphite. So we know how to do these things, but you need the people and you need the capital to, directed capital, if you will, to get back on track.
Yeah. Wanted to talk about another, and I'm sure other speakers will cover this today, but this issue now that is increasingly getting a lot of attention is AI and the energy that's needed to fuel data centers. Meta has announced that huge project in Northeast Louisiana, and I'm just wondering if you could sort of give your general thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's in Richland County, or parish, which is not rich. but the idea here is they want to build a facility. It's going to cost about $10 billion. It will equal, in terms of capacity, all of the existing data centers in Virginia, right, which is where all of them are right now. Right. So it's a really big deal. What you need is a source of inexpensive electricity. Louisiana is usually number 1 or 2 from the bottom in that list. So we have very competitive electricity available. Just the electricity is going to require 2 gigawatts, in the equivalent of 2 new baseload nuclear plants. Right. And you need land and you need water. Mm-hmm. Not so many people. It's not going to use a lot of people, but the people part of the equation will be dominant during the construction phase. Mm-hmm. So we need more electricians, we need more plumbers, we need lots of engineers to get these things built. That's a transferable skill set. And while we're at it, we've spent a lot of time politically talking about the deficit, if you will, in goods in our GDP calculations. We never talk about the surplus in services. All of our bankers, all of our educational institutions, there's a big debate about foreign students coming into the country. That is a way for us to earn hard currency, and it works, but it precisely for that reason and for legitimate concerns about industrial espionage and stuff. There's been a kibosh, if you will, on bringing in or attracting those foreign students. There are plenty of schools in Europe those people can go to. Right. There are plenty of schools in Canada and Mexico, for that matter. And so we're in this business side of the academic institution, and we think we're making a contribution. We are attracting foreign capital and grants and all of the rest of it to the U.S., which helps our balance of payments, but nobody ever talks about the service side.
Yeah, interesting. Just a couple more points. Could you just very briefly discuss, we're in the last throes of the Louisiana legislature, what's been going on energy-wise? You've mentioned some of the local concerns that have been expressed about CCS and other things.
Yeah, well, CCS is carbon capture and sequestration. Yeah. And what this is suffering from right now is it was a big part of the IRA. Right. And, there's about, $3.7 billion, I think, that has been removed from the budget on projects that were already approved. That is a no-no if you're trying to build confidence in long-term economic benefits. The biggest issue for Louisiana is one of the core support things that you would see when the Secretary of LED gets up here. It will be the idea of carbon sequestration as a way to produce blue hydrogen. Right. Blue hydrogen just simply means I produce hydrogen like I've always produced it. Louisiana produces double-digit share of the U.S. supply today, but they produce it starting with methane, which is carbon and hydrogen. Mm-hmm. The idea of green hydrogen is to simply take water, which is hydrogen and oxygen, break it apart. That's expensive. It does require a lot of electricity, but you can make it work. What we have done historically is take methane and strip the hydrogen off and replace it with oxygen so that we have a lot of CO2 and a lot of hydrogen. Mm-hmm. We can't do that without CCS. So if you want to have a hydrogen hub in Louisiana, you want to switch over and decarbonize some of the industry, which the prior administration was big on. All of that is going to require blue hydrogen. In turn, that's going to require CCS. Mm-hmm. So make up your mind.
Yeah. So do you think they'll be able to achieve any kind of consensus on this in any time left?
I do think so. And you've seen the current administration here in the state has done a good job of trying to placate some of these complaints and get people realigned. But the other issue you have, besides simply funding the sequestration, and we are a state with primacy, one of 4 that can actually put the stuff in the deep saline aquifers. But I've got to get it from where it's being produced to where it's going to be sequestered.
Right.
And we know how to build pipelines. We got more pipelines per capita than any place on earth, right? So we know how to do that. But there are concerns, not in my backyard type concerns, people saying, well, I don't want to have a CO2 pipeline explode and kill my children, which is, I have to point out to people, CO2 doesn't burn, it's one of the feet. I can asphyxiate you with it, but I can't kill you with it. It's not a toxin.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, we need to do a better job of educating the people who are making these decisions, not with intent of being superior or anything like that, simply saying, everything in life is a trade-off. There's a pros and cons. Here are the pros and cons of the particular issue that we're addressing. Louisiana, Tulane has done, and LSU as well with their Center for Energy Study, have done a good job of trying to do those educational steps, and we want to continue doing that.
Well, that segues perfectly into my last question, which is sort of like what Tulane is doing to sort of bolster the energy workforce and what you see the state doing overall in terms of preparing students to go into the energy field.
Well, we're doing a couple of things. We talk about experiential learning, which is a typical academic sort of term, but the idea is we take students, some of them engineers, some of them people with technical backgrounds, but others with liberal arts backgrounds, and we have a 1-year master's program which teaches them about the structure of the industry world. How do the economic models work? What are Louisiana's strengths or the U.S.'s strengths versus other locations? How do they do it in Texas versus how we do it in Louisiana, or how New York does it versus California? We're agnostic about the particular type of energy. You won't find Tulane professors saying the only way to do this is with nuclear, or the only way to do this is with hydrocarbons. What we will say is that there are pros and cons to everything, and you have to you need to be knowledgeable about what your alternatives are before you make a decision.
Okay. Well, look, we're about out of time, so we'll just leave it there. But thanks again for joining us this morning on these important issues.
Thank you for having me.